to you good people again on this Lenten season of 2019. What I want to do is talk about my book, I Want to See, in chapter 3 here now. It's called Who is Blind? A First Look. The Greek word tuphlos is used in both the Old Testament, the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Old Testament, and Mark's Gospel and the other Gospels. It sometimes refers to a person who is physically blind. A bunch of the other times, it's used to describe the spiritual issue that a person has of not seeing wisdom. So I want to contextualize blind Bartimaeus sitting by the way. I want to contextualize him and the way that I understand how Mark's gospel is using these words, so that you and I can sit by him and get a sense of the implications of these words for us. So the first word simply to look at is tuphlos. In Greek, it means to be blind. Both the Torah, the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, talk about physical blindness. But especially the Isaiah and prophetic tradition talk about the relationship between blindness and idolatry, oppression, and willfulness to walk against the way of God. So there's 2 ways that the book of Isaiah approaches this. In looking at the people being blind. We grope like the blind along a wall, groping like those who have no eyes. We stumble at noon as in the twilight, among the vigorous as though we were dead. For our transgressions before you, O God, are many, and our sins testify against us. That's chapter 59 in Isaiah. That's the path of the way toward death, toward folly, and describing the path toward life and wisdom. There's the prediction that Isaiah makes in chapter 35. The people are promised salvation and light and life, healing of grief and of fear, and so on. It says, the eyes of the blind shall be opened. That's the path to light. They shall be opened. It's not like the blind are going to get glasses and see all of a sudden. It's the work of God to open the eyes. The difference between wisdom and folly is highlighted in the Wisdom of Solomon. It's in Catholic Bibles. In chapter 19, chapter 17 it makes this picture of Israel. It uses the picture of Israel in Egypt. They're tempted and forced to be idolaters of Pharaoh. They are in a whole other world. This is a situation the writer points to, but it's really the situation after Greece came in and tried to impose its ways on the people toward idolatry. And it talks about the situation of Israel. For the whole world was illuminated with bright light and went about its work unhindered, while over those people alone heavy night was spread. These are the idolaters. An image of darkness that was destined to receive them. But still heavier was the darkness they were to themselves. It's in chapter 17 of Wisdom. That there's not just, there's certainly the physical, no, there's the ramifications in life about how to live when we are a burden to ourselves, heavier than the darkness that they were to themselves. So the question I posed was, what if Bartimaeus is blind in this biblical sense? What if Bartimaeus is blind, and I'm going to propose later, as the disciples were, as the scribes were, as the Pharisees were? And that Bartimaeus is sitting by the way going, That's the question I want to ask. So he's sitting by the way. We looked at that in the last video in chapter 2 about hodos and how it's characterized. The way, the path, the journey, the road is characterized as the path either to wisdom or toward folly. And Isaiah, who's quoted at the beginning of the Gospel of Mark chapter 1, as it is written in the prophet Isaiah, "Behold, I am sending my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way. The voice of one crying out in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make his paths straight." Now, it sounds like it's, and I've taken this for many years myself, it's a building project. You're going to take the mountains and lower them, get the machinery out and lower them. You're going to get the machinery out and lower the valleys. What's interesting, and I didn't show a lot of this in my book, but both mountains and valleys were places of idolatry. And I quote this place from this passage from Jeremiah. They, the people of Israel, built high places of Baal in the valley of the son of Hinnom to offer up their sons and daughters to Molech, though I did not command them. Nor did it enter my mind that they should do this abomination, causing Judah to sin. In other words, the offering of their children as holocausts was the terrible offering made in idolatry to Molech. Now, what is idolatry and what does it look like? It's stuff that happens on the way in Mark's gospel. It happens with the disciple and others. Blindness is manifest in interactions without using the word blind. Here's a bunch of them. Jesus went on with his disciples to the village of Caesarea Philippi. We all know what's coming. And on the way, he asked his disciples, "But who do you say that I am?" And they answer him, all these different people. And "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter says, "You are the Messiah." And Jesus goes on to say, "The Son of Man's going to suffer, be arrested and die and rise on the third day." And Peter comes up and says, rebukes him saying, "This should never happen to you." And Jesus takes him aside and rebukes Peter saying, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." The way has the way of wisdom toward God and the way of folly toward self and self-protection. And Satan here, "Get behind me, Satan," is the one who tempts Jesus or the disciples off the path toward God. So here's another one. The disciples on the way, they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent, because on the way, they argued with one another about who was the greatest. So being on the path toward God, following Jesus, also involves this question. What were you arguing about on the way? What is your path? It's about, am I the greatest or not? Well, you others obviously aren't. And another one. As Jesus was setting out on the way, a man ran up and knelt before him. "What must I do to attain eternal life?" And he looked at him and loved him and talked about the commandments, and then finally said, "You lack one thing. Go sell what you have. Give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me." And the disciples went, "We can't stand this." And this is on the way following Jesus. Last one I'm going to cover in chapter 10. They were on the way going to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking ahead of them. They were amazed, and those who followed were afraid. So he took the 12 aside and told them again what was going to happen to him. See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be handed over. They were terrified about that. And that's happening on the way. That's the way that Bartimaeus is sitting beside, blind to the implications of following Jesus on the way, as the disciples who were following Jesus on the way were also blind. I'm going to pass over the thing on the study of the parable of the sower and the seed. But notice that, because that's very important. What are the things that tempt a person off the way, that get a person off the way? They're very contemporary things. I'm going to pass over the study of Bartimaeus crying out with a loud voice, the Greek kradzo. I'm going to pass over that. When Jesus asked Bartimaeus, "What do you want?" He said, "I want to see." And a lot of us could say, well, he's blind. Of course he wants to see. More than that, he uses the Greek word anablepo, which technically means to look up or look back. Now, this is interesting because I think I listed about 8 or 9 different words that can be used for the verb to see. So I'm betting on the fact that Mark uses anablepo to refer to the Old Testament usage in this, the Septuagint. A couple of them. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had separated from him, this is Genesis 13, "Lift up your eyes now, look up, and look from the place you are, for all the land that you see I will give you to your descendants." And the word of the Lord came to him. This is chapter 15. He brought him outside and lift up your eyes and look to the heavens and count the stars if you can, because so shall your descendants be. So it's look up. Here's a manifestation of the covenant fidelity of God. There's a story also about from the binding of Isaac. I'm going to jump over that. But the deal is, Bartimaeus makes a theological statement here. I want to look up and see the covenant fidelity of God, the steadfast love of God, so that I might be able to walk on the way behind Jesus to the cross and to new life. That's my wager in this whole thing. Bartimaeus was saved on the way. Go your way, your faith has saved you. The Greek word here, sozo, means save, to save. It also means to heal. It's used a bunch in the Gospels about healing. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. That's in chapter 8. It's a very key thing. It's one of the main teachings to the disciples who are blind, who are on the way, and they're not getting it. Those who want to save their life will lose it. It's a tough saying. The camel passing through the eye of the needle, because Jesus said it is much easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich person to get into the kingdom of heaven. Then who can be saved? For mortals it is impossible. With God all things are possible. To be saved, to be healed, to look up, to follow Jesus on the way to life, to God, and to wisdom is possible through God. Now, This is what I think it means to be sitting with Bartimaeus this Lent on the way. Consider the possibility that you and I are blind to the implications and the meaning of our lives, to the depth of our blindness and willingness to see the path that Jesus describes, and especially that last one, for those who want to save their life will lose it. We're sitting by the way, next to the way. Jesus comes by and says, what do you want? I want to see. I want to look up. I want to look up and see the fidelity of God, the covenant fidelity of God, and be able thereby to see, to be saved, to be healed, so that I might follow you, O Lord, on the way, handing over my life as you hand over your life for the sake of others. So that's my wager about what it means for us to be sitting by Bartimaeus on the way. How are we? Where are we? And in the next chapter, we're going to look at what does it mean for the disciples and raise the question, are they blind too? So God bless us in this Lenten season and lead us to be sitting by Bartimaeus and attending to the mystery of our lives as they're revealed in the Gospel of Mark about Bartimaeus' life. Thank you, and God bless you very much.